just so you get the backdrop of what's happening, there was a Syrian general, and his name was Naaman. Most of us know a little bit about him. He was, the Bible calls him a mighty man of valor. Now, this is important because when you actually look at what that means, it actually means he was like a modern day superhero. That's what a mighty man of valor was. He was an incredible warrior. He was an incredible man, and he was the general of this army. The Bible tells us that God saved Syria because of Naaman, because he was such a great warrior, and because he was dedicated to God. God gave them victory, and the Bible specifically says because he was a man of courage. He was respected, he was loved, he was followed, but he was, there's always that but he was a leper. He suffered from leprosy. Now, it's hard for us sometimes to understand a little bit about leprosy because it's not very common in our society. It's not very common in our country. Although there are some cases in the United States of America of leprosy, it's not something that you probably have seen. I've been in certain countries where there is leprosy. In fact, I remember one time specifically that a person came to me, it's highly contagious, with leprosy in their entire arm. And God led me, don't do this at home unless God tells you to do it, to anoint his entire arm, and I touched it. And I prayed for him, and immediately his skin was totally restored, like that of a baby. Amen. Now, in biblical times, it was interesting because, this was the times. This is not what God said. This is just the thinking and the culture of the time. It's important that you understand it. People thought that if you had leprosy, you had probably committed some terrible sin. If you hadn't committed the sin, then your father had committed it. And if he hadn't committed the sin, then probably your grandfather or somebody in your family had committed some incredible sin. Now, these people were condemned basically by society. And since it was so highly contagious, they would walk around and they would shout out before they got near anybody, unclean, unclean, unclean. They would do that to let people know that they had leprosy and they shouldn't come anywhere near them. They were basically dead men walking. They lived outside of the gates of the city. They were not allowed inside the city. And if they ever got close to anybody, because they hadn't said that they had leprosy and had come in near contact someone, and then the person noticed, the custom was to actually spit on them. It's horrible. It was a terrible situation. So this man, who's highly respected, this man who's a Syrian army general, he decides that he wants to go see the prophet of Israel, Elisha, in order to be healed. And so he goes to him, and we probably know the story. The prophet tells him, you need to go to the river Jordan, and you need to dunk yourself 7 times in the water. And after you've done that, you're going to be healed. Your skin is going to go back to normal. Of course, he argues, and he's like, the river Jordan is dirty. There's cleaner rivers in Israel. I thought you were just going to maybe pray for me, lay hands on me, anoint me with oil, and I'd be on my way, and I'd be healed. But the prophet says, no. You either do exactly what I'm telling you to do, or you will not be healed. So at the end of the day, he listens. And the Bible tells us that he goes into the river and he comes out and his skin is totally restored. And so now he is a Syrian general, highly respected, loved by the people, a man of valor. But now he's also totally healed by the power of God because he did what the prophet asked him to do. So what happens? He goes to the prophet, Elisha, and he wants to bless him. He's so excited about what God has done in his life that he wants to actually give the prophet an offering. He wants to bless him. He wants to show appreciation. And so he goes to the prophet's house and tells him, I have this money. I have this offering to give you. And the prophet says to him, I don't want the money. You cannot pay for your healing. In fact, keep it. I don't want it. I'm thankful, whatever, but keep the money. So the man cannot turn the money into him. And so he goes back to his chariot or his horse or whatever he was on with all of his people, all of his men, and he starts to go away. Now the prophet had a helper, a prophet's assistant. This man's name was Gehazi. You're going to have to remember that name because he is super important in what I'm talking to you about today. Gehazi was the assistant to the prophet. He decides to track down Naaman and goes to Naaman and he says to him, listen, the prophet has changed his mind. He said for you to go ahead and give me the money so I can take it to him. Now remember, Naaman is so excited, so grateful for what the prophet, through the power of God, did for him, that he just takes out the money and hands it to Gehazi. But Gehazi doesn't take it to the prophet. Gehazi goes to his own house and he stashes the money and he says, I'm going to keep it for myself. Then he goes back to the house of the prophet a little while later, and wouldn't you know, the prophet says, what have you been up to? He says, no, nothing. Where have you been? Nothing, I'm here now. And then he tells him, I know what you did. If God used me to heal the leprosy on that man, do you not think that God would speak in my ear about the money that you stole? Now, this is a bad sin. One of the worst sins. Listen, we don't like to classify sins because sin is sin and sin will separate you from God, right? But when you look at this, culturally, when you look at this ecclesiastically, however you want to look at it, he stole money that was given to the man of God, which we could say the church. Can you imagine that? That's horrible. And so the prophet all of a sudden says, 2 Kings chapter 5, verse 27, we're going to put it up there. This is absolutely crazy what the prophet tells him. 2 Kings says, the leprosy, therefore, of Naaman shall cleave unto you and unto your seed forever. And he went out from the presence, a leper as white as snow. Lord have mercy. Can you imagine committing a sin that is so serious, that is so abominable, that the prophet of God speaks these words over you, and not only are you hurt, but now your children and your children's children and your children's 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 children, everyone in your lineage, your seed, is now cursed because of what you did. I don't know about you, but how do you go back to your children? I just want to put this into perspective. How do you go to your children and say, listen, you just got this disease. You now have leprosy. You're going to die a slow and painful death. It's going to be horrible. You're going to be looked upon as an abomination. And the reason it happened is because of me. How do you go back to your wife? Our children now have leprosy. I have leprosy. We're all going to die, and it's because of something I did. I'll tell you what, I wouldn't go home to Maria. I would never go back home. I'd be so gone. Yeah, man, I could not tell that to my wife. I would be hanged. You see, we love the story of Naaman, and we preach about it all the time. Because he was healed, because he was a great general, because he was a man that was respected, because he did something and he received his miracle. Everyone that's been a Christian for a while, you've probably heard a preaching about Naaman. You've probably heard what he did and how great he was and how God restored his flesh. But we rarely talk, if ever, about Gehazi. Because we don't like to talk about that stuff. Why bring that up in the church? Why talk about that? Let me tell you something. The Bible is not a book written about men. Every single hero in the Bible had a fault. Every single hero in the Bible missed it because it's not a story about man, it's a story about God. Every other religion in the world, they uplift their heroes. They're the greatest. They did this, they did that. The Bible's like, Abraham, he messed up. Moses, oh yeah, he didn't even get it. But Peter, come on, man, he was a hothead. The Bible tells you the truth about everybody because it's not lifting up man, it's lifting up God. And in fact, that's one of the greatest proofs that the Bible was not written by man. It was inspired by God. Because we have the tendency to lift up our heroes, to lift up our people, to make them so great. God said, no, it's not about them. This is a love story about me. Bad decisions are made all the time. I've made plenty. Naaman is walking away with the greatest miracle he had ever experienced in his life. But at the same time, Gehazi is watching his entire life be destroyed. And it happened so quick, just like that. With the spoken word of one sentence, the leprosy of Naaman shall now cleave unto you and your seed forever. And just like that, his life is destroyed. And just like that, everything is different. Just like that, he stopped being the servant and the assistant of the prophet and now is living outside the city gate, can never come in contact with he couldn't even tell his wife, couldn't even get near his wife. He had to yell it at her from far or else she'd get sick too. And so just like that, it happens all the time where words are spoken and our lives are changed forever. Your dad and I are getting divorced. You're 7 years old, 6 years old. Your dad and I are getting divorced. You know how many people in their 40s, 50s, 60s, 30s, 20s I've spoken to because they still suffer trauma from something they heard when they were 5, 6, 7 years old, afraid to get married, afraid to take a chance because your father and I are getting divorced. Or how about your mother has passed away? Your father has passed away. Yeah, we went through that, my wife and I, with my mother-in-law not too long ago. I had just stepped out of the house. I had maybe gotten to the stop sign when I got the word, she's passed away. Went through that with my dad, 7, 8 years ago before COVID. Or how about this one, standing before a judge and saying, you are guilty and you are sentenced to whatever amount of time. You're fired. And everything you know about your economical status all of a sudden is totally in limbo, totally destroyed. You have no idea how you're going to say, how about this one? I just don't love you anymore. I don't have feelings for you like I used to. It's not the same. We've all been through something similar where words change our life. Where something that is spoken can change us dramatically. One bad decision, and this man, Gehazi, his whole life as he knew it was over. And there's some things that physically we can never fix. Did you hear what I just said? There are certain decisions in life that, as far as this world is concerned, that as far as our body is concerned, sometimes will have an effect forever. And there's things that we just can't fix. I'll never forget us going out to eat when the kids were little, my children were little. We're having a great time. We're having a great dinner, and everybody's laughing, and all of a sudden, boom, they dropped the soda all over me. Or, boom, they hit the glass, and it falls to the ground, and it shatters. You can't fix that. And all of a sudden, the mood is totally changed. You're punished. I'm kidding. No, I'm not kidding. My youngest is here, Mario. The others are probably watching online. They're like, Dad's lying. I can't lie. No, I did not forgive them. You're punished. Decisions you know that cannot be undone happen all the time. And I kind of have to ask myself, why is life like that? You know, why is it that sometimes everything's going perfect, right? Why is it that sometimes you're on the top, all the way at the top, and then it seems like in a second, everything changes? I mean, it happened to Jesus. He was going into Jerusalem. We just went through Palm Sunday. He was celebrated. He was recognized as the king. He came in on a donkey, and the people were putting palms on the floor and singing Hosanna to him. And then just a few days later, the same people were screaming out with everything they had, and they were screaming, "Crucify him." It was the greatest up and down season, the biggest up and down week that the world has ever known. But what happened? He walked in, celebrated. He got crucified, but then guess what happened? He rose from the dead. Put your hands together for Jesus. He bounced back. And I always say life is better to people that know how to bounce back. I have a feeling we got some people up in here that have had to bounce back. You were hooked on drugs, but you bounced back. You was involved in gang activity, but you bounced back. You should be dead, but somehow you're not. You bounce back. You were incarcerated, but somehow you bounce back. Come on, somebody. You lost your job. You feel like you lost your career. You lost your first marriage, your second marriage, your third marriage. Come on, somebody. But somehow you bounce back. You've been through hell and back, but you keep bouncing back. Somehow, life is better to those people that know how to bounce back. Gehazi was a mess. How could he do what he did? I would have fired him so quick. I'm being honest with y'all. Y'all want me to be a hypocrite up here? And I would have forgiven him. Jesus loves you. I would have been, Jesus loves you. Get out of here. I'm not good at being fake. Gehazi was a mess up. Gehazi, we say, metió la pata hasta aquí. He stuck his foot up to here, whatever that means in English. But what happened to Gehazi? Because what happened to Gehazi is incredible. I'm going to read it here from my phone. I'm going to ask them to put it up there. And it's found in 2 Kings chapter 8. Remember we just read before that. Now we're reading in chapter 8. And I'm going to read it here from my phone. It says chapter 8, verse 1 through. I'm going to just read it because you have to hear this. That's why I didn't read the whole first part. You have to, then I'm going to have to read another part after this. But listen, keep your seatbelt on. Now Elijah had said to the woman whose son he had restored to life, "Go away with your family and stay a while wherever you can, because the Lord has decreed a famine in the land that will last 7 years." Verse 2. The woman proceeded to do as the man of God had said. She and her family went away and stayed in the land of the Philistines 7 years, the time of the famine. At the end of the 7 years, she came back from the land of the Philistines and went to the king to beg him for her house and land. You see, while she was gone, those 7 years, somebody had taken her house, and now she's going to the king, and she's saying, I'd like to have my land back. This is actually my land. I only left for 7 years because there was nothing here. There was a famine. Verse 4, you ready for this? The king was talking to Gehazi, the servant of the man of God, and has said, "Tell me about all the great things Elijah has done." Just as Gehazi was telling him about Elijah, and how he had restored the life of a child and how Elijah had brought him back to life, he was telling this to the king. The woman, this is the woman, she walked in and said, Lord King, this is the woman, this is her son, whom Elijah restored to life. Listen to me. I don't know about you, but I read that, I got some questions. In chapter 5, he's cursed. Him and his whole family. In chapter 8, he's chilling with the king. I thought you weren't allowed in the city, much less in the king's palace. I thought you had leprosy. I thought your children were also condemned to that. And here you are 3 chapters later, and you're talking to the king and telling him about all the miracles that Elijah has done. And it calls him Elijah's servant. So I got to ask myself, what happened between chapter 5 and chapter 8? Why would the king be talking to a sinner? Remember? Why would the king be talking to an outcast? And even less, why would the king be talking to someone that had such a contagious disease like leprosy? I've got to ask myself, what did God do between chapter 5 and chapter 8? Wasn't he done with? Did he come back? Is there a lesson in Gehazi that we rarely hear about in this man who committed this sin that seemed like the unpardonable sin? I know it wasn't, but I'm just using that as an illustration. Did something happen? Did he bounce back? And if he did, how? Because if he did it, then guess what? I can do it too. If he did it, you can do it too. If he did it, your family member can do it too. And if he did it, I want to know how he did it so I can go ahead and do it when I need to do it. Because we all need at some point restoration. And God is in the restoring business. That's what he does. He turned the valley of Acre into the door of hope. He turned Peter, who was a hothead, into the apostle that led the church at Jerusalem. He let Jesus' death become the greatest single miracle in the history of the world. He let David, just a little pastor, a little shepherd boy, become the greatest king the world has ever known. What did he do with you? What did he do with me? Just a little boy from Opalaka. Just a little boy hanging out with the wrong crowd. Just a little boy dropping out of school, selling drugs, doing drugs, gang with the gangs. Come on, somebody. What did he do? He turned me into a pastor. What can he do with you? I don't know, but I know he'll do something. What's he going to do with your family? I don't know, but I know he's going to do something. He's getting ready to do some restoration. And restoration is difficult. Any of you that are into selling homes, buying ugly homes and selling them? I know we got a lot of realtors in here. If you do that, you'll know that a lot of times, a lot easier to knock the house down and do it again or just sell the land than to restore a home. It costs so much money. The Washington Monument was made for $250,000 many years ago. And when it was restored in 1986, it was restored for $86 million. It cost $250 to make, $86 million to restore. You know what restoration means? Are you ready? It means to bring something back to its original state, but to a better condition. You see, that's what God does with us. And you say, but I never was in a good condition. I was born in sin. Are you ready? He brings us back to the original position. But he ain't talking about you and me and our old position. He's talking about Adam and Eve and their original position. It's called the atonement. And it means that God wants to bless you with a relationship with him. He wants to bless you so that sin has no power over your life. He wants to bless you so that you're protected, so that you're provided for. Come on, somebody. So that you have communion. He wants to restore. In fact, Joel 2:25 and 6 says, I will restore to you the years that the locust has eaten and the cankerworm and the caterpillar. They used to eat up the crops. God said, don't worry about that. I'm going to give you that and a lot more. I'm going to restore it to its original condition and even better. I need to say this. I've been working with young people and gangs and drugs for so many years. Literally, I want to say thousands and thousands of young people hooked on drugs, involved in gangs, many of them that said, there's just no way out for me. Thousands and thousands of teenagers. I'm going low. It could be tens of thousands of teenagers. Those of you that know me for a long time, you know that it's true. But listen to me. I've never seen one person. Listen, I'm not saying it hasn't happened. I'm giving you my experience. I've never seen one person, me, that gets free from drugs without God. I've never seen one person successfully change their life from gangs without God. Oh, listen, you say, oh, I know somebody. Well, I ain't never met that dude. He might be out there. But even if he did, even if he was able to do it, he still couldn't get rid of the sin that separated him from God. Because listen to me, no combination of rotten eggs can make a good omelet. I need to say that again. A tiger can't change his stripes, and a bent tree cannot be straightened physically. But Jesus said, what is impossible for man is possible with me. He'll change the lion's stripes, tiger's stripes. He'll fix that bent tree. He'll take a goat and make him a sheep. Come on, somebody. He'll take a tear and turn it into a wheat. He is in the restoration business. So again, what did this man do? This will be the last verse I read. It's going to be in 2 Kings chapter 7. We're going to go back just a little bit. Because remember, in 5, he's cursed. In chapter 8, he's hanging with the king. In chapter 7, it tells us what happened. Now there were 4 men with leprosy. That's Gehazi and his children. At the entrance of the gate, they said to each other, why stay here until we die? We'll go into the city. The famine is there. If we go into the city, the famine is there. And we will die. Remember, there was a famine for 7 years. And if we stay here outside of the gate, we will die. Let's go over to the camp of the Arameans and surrender. If they spare us, we will live. If they kill us, then we're going to die anyways. At dusk, remember this. At dusk, they got up and went to the camp of the Arameans, who, when they reached the edge of the camp, not a man was there. For the Lord had caused the Arameans. I touched this by mistake. I lost my place here. When they reached the edge of the camp, there was no one there, for the Lord had caused the Arameans to hear a sound of chariots and horses, and they said to one another, look, the king of Israel has hired the Hittites, the Egyptians, and they're coming to attack us. So they got up and they left at dusk and abandoned their tents. This is crazy. Because at dusk, the lepers made a decision. And the moment they made a decision, at dusk, they heard chariots and horses, and they said, Israel has gathered all the armies. And they took off in fear. And when these people got there, all the food and everything was there, and then Gehazi took all this stuff to the king, back to the city. And somewhere along the line, he must have been healed. Because later we see him talking to the king as if nothing. And later we see him again being called the helper of the prophet, the servant of the prophet. And so you got to ask yourself, what happened? I don't know if you visualize this, but I could see these people, 4 lepers, saying, you know what, I'm going, and they're walking over there. They're looking all weird and walking over there. And as they're walking over there, all of a sudden, God says, look at this. And he sends what sounds like thunder, like horses, like chariots. As they made a decision, God made a decision. What am I telling you? How do you bounce back? You got to make a decision. They tell you you got an incurable disease. Some people go home and say, I'm going to die. I'm dead. I'm going to do this. I'm going to do that because I'm dying. Other people say, nah, I'm going to live. I'm not going to die. I don't accept this. God's not done with me just yet. Every time in the Bible a miracle happened, they did something. Rise up and walk. The guy couldn't walk. Go show yourself in the pool. Wash yourself. He said, go to the priest and show yourself. Do something. Every single time he said, do something. Gehazi and his sons did something. They said, we can stay here and die. We can go inside the gates and still die. Or we can go over there and see what happens because maybe we will win. And when they did, I'll never forget. I finished with this. I closed the laptop. I always say that means nothing. I'm cloudy. And I got bit by a poisonous spider on my back. And I was playing basketball. I rolled on the floor. The lights were off in Tropical Park. I didn't even see a spider. I rolled on. I didn't know. And when I finished playing, or when I got up, I had this huge ball on my back. I couldn't even play. I was like, I must have glass or something. And I went home and I was in this terrible pain. And I told my wife, and it kept getting worse and worse and worse and worse. And finally in the morning, she convinced me at some point to go to the hospital. I went to the hospital. They told me it was nothing. I went home, it got worse. I told my wife, for me to tell my wife this, for any man to do this, I gotta go back. I went back, the doctor said, yeah, I told you got nothing. You're taking antibiotics, you're good. And then I went a third time. And he told me, what's wrong with you? The doctor said to me, what's wrong with you? He said, nobody goes to the hospital for this. Just go home, stop it. And then I went back and I told my wife, I said, he can call me a punk. He can call me, but I am doing really bad. I don't know. I feel like I'm going to die. And I went back again, and an infectious disease doctor looked at me, and he said, you have a spider bite. When did you have that? I said, that was Sunday night. He goes, you know what? It's Thursday. They rushed me to intensive care. The venom had gone into my system. My organs were shutting down. I was dying. And the doctor said to me, you know you're going to die. I just have to tell you. I got to be honest with you. And I said to him, I'm not going to die. He said, why? I go, because God's not done. God's not done. And then I told him, don't you tell my wife. He said, why? I said, because she's going to get worried. We got children that are small. This is way back. I don't want my wife stressed over something that is not going to happen. He looked at me like I was crazy, and he felt like he still had in breach medical privacy and told my wife anyways. You got to be ready. You have children. Your husband is going to die. And when I found that out, I said, listen, again, don't do this at home. You only do stuff, crazy stuff like this when God speaks to you. I told her, I said, I want to go home. You can't go home, sir. You're too sick. I said, you said I'm going to die, right? Yeah? Well, I'd rather die at home than die here with you. And I actually told her, I said, you're fired. You're not touching me. You're not doing nothing to me. You're not taking any more blood. You are fired. My wife was there. I said, I want to go home. He made me sign some paperwork, sent me home. Babe, has that been 20 years? Here I am. You got to do something.